Okay, let's unpack this. You make, countless decisions every single day about what to buy,
Yeah, every day.
from the coffee you grabbed this morning to maybe that online impulse purchase or, even a huge one like a car.
Mm-hmm.
But have you ever really stopped to dissect why you chose that specific one? What's truly going on beneath the surface?
Right.
This deep dive is all about peeling back those layers and getting inside the mind of the consumer, which of course means getting inside your mind.
And it's way more fascinating and, frankly, complex than just, needing something and grabbing the first option you see.
Definitely.
Our sources today give us a really fantastic map of this whole territory. They explore the powerful forces, both the obvious ones and the unseen ones, that shape our purchasing behavior.
Absolutely. We've got a stack of material here that dives deep into this whole world of consumer buying dynamics.
Yeah, lots to cover.
Our mission today is basically to pull out the most essential insights, the real aha moments, and help you understand not just what influences you, but how that influence actually works.
Exactly. We'll look at everything from the huge cultural backdrop that subtly guides us, all the way down to the tiny subconscious cues that grab our attention.
Okay.
We'll walk through the typical journey, let's say, you might take when deciding to buy something, explore how that journey can be totally detoured or sped up,
Mm-hmm.
and even get into some surprising findings from behavioral economics that show just how irrational we can sometimes be.
It's really a look under the hood, isn't it? Not just how companies try to reach you, but how you as a consumer actually perceive things, process them, decide, and, act.
Precisely.
Let's dive in.
Okay.
So where do we even begin with something this complex? It seems like our sources suggest starting with the big picture, right? The external forces.
Exactly. The things shaping us before we even think about buying. Think cultural factors, social factors, personal ones. And the absolute biggest picture here is culture itself. It's like the bedrock, the fundamental way a person learns what to want, how to behave. If you grew up in, say, the U.S., you absorbed certain values, things like achievement, maybe individualism, practicality.
Sure.
But someone raised in a different part of the world, they might have a completely different outlook on life, relationships, consumption. Companies that operate globally have to get this. They need to understand these deep cultural currents.
And then within that broad culture, you have subcultures.
Right. These are groups sharing values based on, nationality, religion, maybe even just the region you live in.
And if a subculture is big enough, marketers will often tailor entire campaigns just for them.
Yeah, makes sense. Then layered on top of that is social class. Think of it as divisions in society where people share similar values, interests, behaviors.
Okay.
Our material mentioned one classic model, breaking this down into layers, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
People in different social classes often show really distinct preferences for products and brands.
Even if the products are functionally pretty similar.
Exactly.
Even then.
Okay, moving in a bit closer now, we hit social factors. This is all about the people and groups around you influencing you.
And a huge part of this is your reference groups.
Reference groups. Tell me more.
These are basically the groups that directly or indirectly influence your attitudes or behavior. So you've got the ones you belong to, interact with regularly, family, friends, coworkers.
Your primary groups.
Right. And then there are more formal groups like clubs or professional associations. The key thing is that these groups expose you to new behaviors. They influence how you see yourself, and they create pressure to conform, which, yes, directly impacts what you might decide to buy.
It's not just who you are with either, is it? You're also influenced by groups you want to be like.
Your aspirational groups.
Right. And interestingly, even groups whose values you actively reject, both can shape your choices.
Absolutely. And within these groups, you often find opinion leaders.
Ah, the influencers? Sort of? Kind of, yeah. These are the folks others look to for advice about products. Maybe that friend who always knows which new phone is best, or the neighbor who recommends the perfect lawnmower.
Gotcha.
They're usually knowledgeable, confident, well-connected. Marketers actively try to identify and reach these people, hoping they'll talk up their products.
Building on that, the sources also looked at social structure itself, like how people are connected.
Yeah, the networks.
Small, close-knit groups or cliques, they're great for sharing info within the group, right?
Definitely. But the material noted they can sometimes be less open to outside ideas.
Okay.
That's where people who act as liaisons, connecting different groups without really belonging to either or bridges belonging to one group but linked to another become really crucial for spreading information across networks.
It kind of reminds me of that idea of mavens, connectors, and salesmen, those archetypes who can really ignite interest in something.
Yeah, helping ideas spread like, well, an epidemic. Though our sources also pointed out that some research suggests just relying only on big influencers might not be the whole story.
Right, that's where that idea of cultivating bees came in.
The superfans.
Exactly. Those hyper-devoted customers who aren't necessarily famous, but just live to spread the word about a brand they love.
Lego's ambassador program is a perfect example.
Yeah.
They target their most enthusiastic followers, recognizing the power of that really passionate, organic word of mouth.
And it gets really modern, almost sci-fi, when you look at how firms are trying to measure this stuff online now.
Oh yeah, the scoring.
They're scoring consumers way beyond just credit reports, using e-scores to estimate buying power based on your online activity, your purchases.
And influence measurement tools, trying to track your online clout.
Yeah.
Chevrolet, for example, apparently used one like Clout.
I remember Clout.
Yeah. To find potential car buyers with high online influence. They offered them test drives, hoping they'd chat about it online.
It's just a digital age twist on word of mouth, isn't it? Which, our sources reminded us, is still incredibly powerful offline, face-to-face.
Oh, massively. Think about it. People I know and trust, that's often the most valuable source of information you can get before making a purchase.
Although the material did touch on the more controversial side of this.
Like paying people to promote stuff without saying so.
Yeah, sometimes called shill or stealth marketing. The Sony Ericsson example was noted.
Right, the actors pretending to be tourists.
Asking strangers to use their new phone to take pictures. It certainly sparks conversation about transparency, especially online where it can be really tough to figure out who's genuine.
Definitely a gray area.
Okay, stepping back slightly, but still within social factors, the family is arguably the most influential group when it comes to buying decisions.
Wow, huge influence. You learn core values from your parents, your siblings, and that influence can last a lifetime.
I mean, the sources mentioned almost 40% of families have the same auto insurance as the husband's parents. That's sticky.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the most direct influence on your daily purchases is usually your immediate family, your spouse, your children.
And while those traditional roles around who buys what are definitely changing,
They are.
joint decision-making is still really common for bigger purchases like cars or vacations.
And it's interesting how men and women can sometimes respond differently to the same marketing message. Maybe women valuing connection more, men relating more to competition perhaps, generalizations, but interesting patterns.
And the kids, don't forget the kids. Their influence is massive and it's growing.
Oh yeah, they're not just asking for toys anymore.
No way. They're influencing decisions on everything from electronics to where the family goes on vacation. They spend billions themselves every year.
And for them, what their friends like and do can be just as, if not more important than any advertisement they see.
It starts so young, too. The material highlighted that kids recognize logos and brands incredibly early.
Amazing, isn't it? They quickly learn to distinguish ads from content and grasp that ads are trying to persuade them.
So companies target them effectively through tie-ins, like Disney characters on pajamas, leveraging that early brand recognition.
Smart marketing, tapping into that early exposure.
Finally, within social factors, we have roles and status. We all wear different hats, right? Parent, employee, friend.
And these roles come with a certain status. We often choose products that we feel reflect that role and the status we have, or maybe the status we want to have.
That aspiration factor again.
Exactly. Marketers absolutely need to be aware of that status symbol potential in their products.
Okay, let's shift gears. We've talked about the external world, all these influences swirling around you. How does all that filter into a purchase decision?
Right. This brings us to the crucial psychological processes our sources highlight: motivation, perception, learning, and memory. These are the internal mechanisms.
So it's like marketing messages and the environment enter your mind.
Yep. But what happens next depends entirely on your unique psychology, your characteristics. Marketers are constantly trying to understand that black box inside your head.
Okay, so motivation is the starting gun, you said?
Pretty much. You have needs, basic ones like hunger or thirst, and psychological ones like needing recognition or esteem. A need only becomes a motive when it's strong enough to actually push you towards action.
Got it.
And the sources delve into different ways of thinking about motivation. Some suggest deep unconscious forces are at play.
Freud territory.
A bit, yeah. That we react subconsciously to shapes, colors, sounds in ways we can't even articulate. Techniques are used to try and uncover these deeper drives.
Like that example about asking women how they felt about adding an egg to cake mix.
Exactly. And discovering it gave them a sense of creativity, of giving birth to the cake, or identifying cultural codes for universal appeal, like they tried to do for the Boeing Dreamliner interior.
Fascinating. Maslow's hierarchy is another way to look at it, right? Sorting needs from basic survival up to self-fulfillment.
Yeah, suggesting we generally address the most pressing ones first. Makes intuitive sense.
And Herzberg's theory adds another layer, distinguishing things that cause dissatisfaction if they're missing.
Like a warranty, maybe.
Right, from things that cause satisfaction if they are there.
Like a product being really easy to use.
So sellers need to fix the potential dissatisfiers and identify the big satisfiers.
Two different jobs, essentially.
Okay, so you're motivated, you're ready to act. But how you act depends entirely on your perception of the situation.
Critical point. Perception is how you select, organize, and interpret information to make sense of the world around you.
And here's where it gets really interesting, according to the sources.
Yeah.
In marketing, perceptions are often more important than objective reality.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Because perceptions are what actually drive your behavior. This is fertile ground for sensory marketing.
Ah, yes, engaging the senses.
Deliberately engaging your senses. Touch, smell, sound, taste, sight, to influence how you perceive a product, a brand, even a store environment.
That marketing memo on sensory marketing was packed with insights. Touch is the first sense we develop, and people who have a strong need for touch feel more confident buying certain things if they can physically handle them first.
Makes sense. And smell. Incredibly powerful because those scent memories stick around longer and can trigger really vivid recollections.
So a pleasant smell in a store can actually make you evaluate the products in the store itself more positively.
Research suggests so, yeah. Sound matters too. Even the sounds in a brand name can subtly influence how you feel about it.
Wow.
And ambient music affects your mood, how long you think you've been somewhere, and yes, potentially how much you spend.
Taste is sort of a combination of all the other senses, isn't it? How food looks, smells, feels.
Exactly. The material even mentioned foreign-sounding brand names affecting how people rate things like yogurt.
And vision is obviously huge, especially in advertising. But it's not just about what you see.
It's how your brain processes it. There are these perceptual biases, like thinking a tall, thin glass holds more than a short, fat one, even when the volume's the same.
Though you might feel like you drank more from the short, fat one.
Exactly. Even something simple like the orientation of a product in an ad, a mug with the handle on the right side, was apparently preferred by right-handed people. Tiny details.
So your brain isn't just a passive sponge soaking everything up. You actively filter information.
Right, using three main perceptual processes: selective attention, selective distortion, and selective retention.
Okay, break those down. Selective attention.
Basically, you ignore most of the stimuli hitting you because you just can't possibly process it all.
Information overload.
Totally. You're more likely to notice things related to a need you have right now, or things you're anticipating, or things that are really different that stand out. Marketers sometimes use disruptive tactics just to try and cut through that noise.
Selective distortion. That sounds interesting.
It is. You tend to interpret information in a way that fits your own existing beliefs or biases.
So you twist things.
People can literally interpret information to align with what they already think or expect. Blind taste tests often show this perfectly. Opinions change dramatically when people know which brand they're trying.
Which is a huge advantage for strong brands, right?
Massive. You might even interpret a neutral experience as positive if you already like the brand.
And selective retention. That's about memory.
Exactly. You remember the stuff that supports your attitudes and beliefs. You'll likely remember the good things about brands you like and forget the good things about competitors.
Again, a big benefit for strong brands. And why marketing messages often need repetition to really sink in.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And while there's always talk about subliminal messages, the sources were pretty clear. There's no real evidence marketers can systematically control you at that level, especially for things you feel strongly about.
Good to know. Okay, the next key psychological process is learning.
Right. Any change in your behavior that comes from experience. Most of your behavior is learned, even incidentally, without trying.
How does that work?
Well, learning theory involves drives, stimuli, cues, responses, and reinforcement. So if you bought a particular brand of laptop, let's say,
Okay.
and had a great experience, that positive reinforcement makes you more likely to buy it again. You might even generalize that good feeling to their other products, like printers.
Ah, generalization. And discrimination is the opposite.
Kind of, yeah. Learning to see the differences between similar things, recognizing a specific brand's unique qualities
So marketers use this all the time.
constantly. By associating products with strong drives you already have, using cues like ads or packaging to trigger responses, and providing positive experiences for reinforcement.
So a new brand might try to connect to the same needs as a competitor
That's generalization.
or highlight features that make them distinct.
That's discrimination.
Got it. Some researchers also look at cognitive learning, right? Like the inferences we make.
Yeah, and there's this concept called the hedonic bias.
Hedonic bias.
It means we tend to take credit when things go right. I've picked the perfect hotel. But blame outside factors when they go wrong. The instructions were terrible.
I think I do that.
We probably all do. This is why good instructions and well-designed products are crucial. You don't want people blaming your product when something goes wrong because they couldn't figure it out.
And we absolutely cannot forget emotions in all this.
No way.
Uh-huh.
Consumer response isn't purely logical or rational. Brands make us feel things maybe proud, excited, confident.
Ads can evoke amusement or nostalgia. Think about brands like Coca-Cola or Hallmark that have built these incredibly powerful emotional connections over decades.
Totally. Marketers deliberately tap into these emotions, often tying them back to functional aspects, too. Toy Story 3 used social media brilliantly to pull on viewers' nostalgia strings.
Right.
Or Kimberly-Clark used social media for You by Kotex to create a space for teens to talk comfortably about feminine hygiene. That wasn't just functional. It built trust and generated huge positive word of mouth.
Emotion-filled brand stories are just inherently more shareable, aren't they?
Definitely. Axe is a classic example. It built its brand almost entirely on the emotional promise of the Axe effect.
Right, the social confidence angle.
Exactly. Using edgy, humorous campaigns focusing on confidence in the social scene, making the product feel like a wingman for young guys. It wasn't really about how the product smelled, not primarily.
Okay, memory is the final psychological piece in this puzzle.
Yep. You have short-term memory, temporary holding, and long-term memory, more permanent storage.
And long-term memory is like a network.
That's a good way to think about it. Bits of info about a brand, its name, what it does, how it made you feel, are like nodes connected by links. Marketing helps build and strengthen these connections, adding more positive associations around the brand node in your memory.
But memory isn't perfect, right? You reconstruct things, fill in gaps.
Absolutely. How well you remember something often depends on how much you processed it initially. Repetition helps, sure, but a really engaging ad might stick with you much faster than a boring one seen many times.
And getting information out of memory can be tough.
It can be, yeah, because other product information interferes. Think of all the ads you see. But overall, memory's pretty durable. The real key is accessibility.
Meaning?
The information might be stored in your brain, but you need the right cue to retrieve it. That's why things like in-store displays, packaging, reminder emails are so important.
They act as retrieval cues.
Exactly.
Right.
Right when you might be making a decision. And being top of mind makes people more likely to think of you, buy you, and talk about you.
Wow. Okay, so with all those internal psychological factors and all the external cultural and social forces at play, how does the rubber actually meet the road? How does the purchase decision itself typically happen?
Right. Well, our sources describe a useful 5-stage model. Now, it's important to say you probably don't consciously tick through every single box every time you buy something.
Especially not for, like, buying milk.
Exactly. But it's a helpful framework, especially for new or more involved purchases. B&G's launch of that CoverGirl eye kit was a great example of engaging consumers at every stage, building awareness with bloggers, driving interest with demos, encouraging post-purchase reviews online.
Yeah.
They hit all the points.
Okay, so what's stage one?
The process usually kicks off with problem recognition, basically, realizing you have a need or a want.
Could be simple, like you're hungry.
That's an internal trigger. Or it could be external. You see a cool new gadget your friend has, and suddenly you want one too.
Uh-huh. So companies try to identify what triggers needs and maybe even increase your motivation for things you might not have thought about buying otherwise.
Precisely. Stage 2 is information search.
Googling stuff, asking friends.
Yep. But it might surprise you, people often search for pretty limited information, even for bigger purchases.
Really?
Yeah. Search can be passive, just being more receptive to information, like noticing car ads after you start thinking about a new car.
Yeah.
Or it can be active, really digging online, asking friends, reading reviews.
And marketers need to know what info you're looking for and when.
Crucial. That example of Unilever and Kroger studying meal planning was insightful. They realized Mondays are key planning days.
Okay.
But the focus, whether it's health or using up leftovers, changes throughout the day. Knowing that helps them target their messages much more effectively.
Where do you get the information from?
4 main places, generally. Personal sources, friends, family. Commercial sources, ads, websites, salespeople. Public sources, media, consumer reports, online reviews. And experiential sources, actually handling or trying the product.
And which are most important?
Well, commercial sources usually provide the most information, but personal, experiential, or independent public sources are often the most trusted and effective in influencing your decision.
Makes sense. You trust your friend more than an ad.
Usually, yes. And people often bounce between online and offline search, too. Look something up online, then go to a store, maybe check reviews on your phone while you're there.
So as you search, you're narrowing down the options.
Exactly. You start with maybe all possible brands in a category, then the ones you're actually aware of, then the subset you'd actually consider buying.
The consideration set.
Right. And finally, the small choice set you'll likely make your final decision from. Marketers must get their brand into those sets.
And understanding how you mentally group products, like thinking about yogurt first by flavor, then by brand, versus the other way around, that's important for companies.
Hugely important for how they position themselves against competitors.
Okay, stage 3, evaluation of alternatives.
Yep. Now you're weighing the options in your choice set. You're trying to satisfy your need, looking for specific benefits from various product attributes.
And what attributes matter most varies wildly, right? Location and price for a hotel.
Safety and tire life for tires.
Exactly.
Companies can segment the market based on which attributes different groups of consumers care about most.
And your beliefs and attitudes really drive this stage.
Absolutely. Your beliefs are what you think is true about a brand or product, and your attitudes are your overall feelings and evaluations, positive or negative.
Attitudes make you act consistently, but they're hard to change.
Very hard. Often companies find it easier to fit their product to your existing attitudes rather than try to change them.
But what if the attitudes are really negative?
Then they might have to take drastic action. The Domino's example is perfect here.
The "Oh, yes, we did" campaign.
Exactly. They publicly admitted their pizza quality was criticized, launched a reformulated product, and built a whole campaign around directly addressing that negative feedback. Bold move, but it worked for them.
There are even models for how consumers evaluate, aren't there? Like multiplying belief strength by attribute importance?
Yeah, expectancy value models. Marketers can use these to figure out strategies. Do they need to change the product itself, change your beliefs about their product, change your beliefs about competitors, or maybe highlight attributes you hadn't considered important before?
Okay, so after evaluating, you form a purchase intention. You've basically decided, but wait, 2 things can still derail that purchase.
That's right. Before the actual purchase decision, 2 factors can intervene. First, the attitudes of others,
What other people think.
especially those close to you, or maybe influential reviewers. How intense is their negative attitude towards your potential choice? And how motivated are you to comply with their wishes? Independent sources like Consumer Reports or trusted online reviews play a big role here.
The success of the movie Ted was mentioned as an example, boosted by positive reviews and social media buzz.
Yeah, showing the power of those external evaluations right before purchase. The second factor is unexpected situational factors.
Like what?
Could be anything. You lose your job, another purchase becomes more urgent, the store's out of stock, things you didn't anticipate.
Or perceived risk comes into play here too.
Definitely. Will the product work? Is it safe? Am I paying too much? Will my friends make fun of me? Will it be a hassle? Consumers develop ways to reduce this perceived risk, like gathering more info, sticking to trusted brands, looking for warranties.
And marketers need to address those risks in their messaging. Money-back guarantee, trusted by millions.
Exactly. Reassure the consumer.
Okay, finally, stage 5, post-purchase behavior. What happens after you buy?
This stage is critical but often overlooked. After you buy, you might feel a bit of doubt or dissonance, buyer's remorse.
Yeah, did I make the right choice?
Right. Smart marketers follow up to reinforce your choice, maybe with a welcome kit or helpful tips to help you feel good about the brand and reduce that dissonance.
And monitoring satisfaction is vital.
Absolutely. Did the product meet, fall short of, or exceed your expectations? If you're satisfied, you'll likely buy again and tell others positive things word of mouth again.
But if you're dissatisfied,
You might ditch the product, complain publicly or privately, warn friends. Companies have found that proactive post-purchase communication can actually reduce returns and cancellations. Just checking in can make a difference.
Marketers also need to know how products are used and disposed of, right?
Yes. How often you use something affects how quickly you'll need to replace it. Companies look for ways to speed up replacement.
Like suggesting you change smoke detector batteries when daylight savings changes.
Classic example. Or adding wear indicators on toothbrushes or filters. And disposal habits are increasingly important, especially with environmental concerns.
There are even businesses built entirely around what happens after a product is used.
Yeah, like companies recycling old tires into playground materials or other products. It's a whole part of the product life cycle.
Okay, so that five-stage model is useful, but you said we don't always follow it rigidly. What about decisions where you're just not that invested?
Good point. Our sources also discuss moderating effects, like low consumer involvement and maybe just seeking variety.
There's a model mentioned about how persuasion works differently depending on involvement.
Right, the elaboration likelihood model. It suggests persuasion happens via one of two routes. A central route, where you really think hard, analyze arguments rationally.
Involvement.
Exactly. Or a peripheral route, where you process information with less effort, relying on simpler cues like, is the spokesperson attractive? Is the packaging nice? Is it a famous brand?
Low involvement.
Right. You generally only use that effortful central route if you're motivated, able, and have the opportunity to think deeply. If not, you tend to take the peripheral shortcut.
And many low-cost, frequently purchased things, maybe like table salt or paper towels, are low involvement for most people.
Typically, yes. You often buy them out of habit, not because you're deeply loyal to the brand.
So marketers try to increase involvement.
They do, by linking products to important issues, like toothpaste and preventing cavities, personal situations, like juice fortified for kids' health, or strong emotions, like cereal linked to heart health. But even then, it often only gets the product to moderate involvement, not high.
And if involvement stays low, marketers rely on those peripheral cues.
Pretty much. Lots of repetition in ads just to build familiarity, sponsorships to create positive associations, appealing promotions like coupons or contests, just trying to make the brand feel familiar and pleasant without asking you to think too hard.
And sometimes, even with low involvement, if there are noticeable differences between brands, maybe like cookies or soft drinks, you might just switch brands purely for variety.
Exactly. Not because you dislike the last one, but just because you feel like trying something different.
So in those categories, the market leader tries to reinforce habit,
Strong shelf presence, lots of reminder ads.
while the smaller players try to encourage you to switch for variety.
Using deals, free samples, ads that say, try something new and exciting. Different strategies for different market positions.
This leads us to the final, and I have to say, absolutely fascinating area our sources explore: behavioral decision theory and behavioral economics.
Ah, yes. This stuff really shakes up the traditional idea that consumers always make purely rational, deliberate decisions.
It's identified countless situations where our choices seem, well, irrational from a strict economic perspective.
Totally. Like how you're more likely to pick an option if a slightly worse, slightly more expensive version is added nearby as a decoy.
Or how we tend to gravitate towards the compromise option in the middle, even if it's not objectively the best on any single dimension.
And get this, our choices can even subtly change how we rate the options after we've picked one. We justify our choice.
Just thinking about the possibility of being wrong can make you favor better-known, safer brands.
Right. Or if an ad makes you vividly imagine regretting not buying something while it's on sale, you're more likely to buy it now to avoid that future regret.
Even tiny changes in how choices are worded or presented can sway us. Framing matters hugely.
And apparently we're not great at predicting our future preferences or how we'll feel after using something repeatedly. We often over or underestimate things.
And interestingly, we're less likely to pick options that come with worthless extra features or freebies, even if they don't cost us anything. It just seems off.
It's weird, right? Our memory of past experiences, like a vacation, is heavily colored by the ending and the overall trend of good or bad moments, not just the simple average.
So a strong finish can make you feel much better about a whole experience, even if parts of it were rough.
Exactly. And sometimes, faced with a seemingly simple choice, our brains manage to make it way more complicated than it needs to be.
This is where the field of behavioral economics really comes in, challenging those traditional economic assumptions.
It highlights how context is everything and how the way decisions are framed totally changes the outcome, even if the underlying options are identical.
Okay, talk about decision heuristics. These are mental shortcuts.
Right. Our brains use them to make quick judgments and decisions, especially when we're uncertain or don't want to expend too much mental energy.
The availability heuristic.
That's estimating how likely something is based on how easily examples pop into your head. Saw a news report about a specific car model having problems. You might overestimate the chance of it happening to you and be more likely to buy the extended warranty.
Because it's available in your memory.
Exactly. The representativeness heuristic is judging something based on how much it looks like a typical example or prototype.
Which is why competing products in a category often end up having similar packaging styles.
Could be part of it, yeah. Make it look like what people expect for that category. And the anchoring and adjustment heuristic.
Anchoring.
That's starting with an initial piece of information, the anchor, and then adjusting your judgment from there, but often not adjusting enough. A strong, positive first impression of a service can set a favorable anchor for everything that follows.
Framing is incredibly powerful, you mentioned.
Hugely. Presenting a phone at $200 feels very different if the other options displayed are $400 versus if they're only $50. Pricing something as just pennies a day is classic framing.
Or comparing a new product to existing familiar ones to help you understand its value relative to what you already know.
Right. That Volkswagen piano stairs promotion, making stairs fun to encourage people to use them instead of the escalator, is a brilliant, playful example of using choice architecture.
Nudging behavior.
Exactly. Subtly influencing behavior for the better, hopefully, without restricting options.
And finally, mental accounting. How we categorize money in our heads.
Yeah, how we code, categorize, and evaluate financial outcomes. The classic example is losing a $50 concert ticket versus losing $50 cash on the way to buy the ticket.
Most people are much more likely to buy a second ticket if they lost the cash, right?
Right, because in their mental account, that $50 cash wasn't yet assigned to the concert, whereas the lost ticket was already mentally spent from the concert entertainment bucket. Buying another feels like spending double from that bucket.
Even though financially the loss is identical.
Exactly. These ideas connect to prospect theory, which suggests, among other things, that we feel losses much more intensely than we feel equivalent gains.
Loss aversion.
Right. And we tend to overweight the chances of low probability events happening, both good and bad. It's a whole fascinating area showing how our brains categorize money and experiences in ways that aren't always strictly logical or consistent.
So what does this all mean? Wow. We've taken this deep dive into the incredibly rich and complex world of consumer behavior.
It really is complex.
We've looked at the huge backdrop of culture and social groups influencing us, the personal factors that make each decision unique to us.
And the fascinating inner workings of our own minds, how they're motivated, how we perceive the world around us, how we learn and remember things.
And the steps, or sometimes the leaps and shortcuts, we take when actually making a decision.
We've seen some great real-world examples, too. From how companies like Domino's tackled criticism head-on.
Yeah, that was bold.
And how joie de vivre hotels craft these unique personalities for their properties. How Axe taps into deep-seated emotions.
And how really subtle concepts like sensory marketing or framing or even mental accounting play this massive role in shaping our choices in the marketplace every day.
Understanding these dynamics really does change how you look at everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everything you buy, everything marketers do.
It's way more than just a catchy jingle or a flashy ad, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. It's about tapping into deep-seated human needs, leveraging our social connections, reflecting our personal identities.
And even, as we saw, designing the very way choices are presented to kind of nudge us one way or another.
So as you go about your day, making decisions big and small, maybe buying coffee or browsing online, here's a thought to leave you with.
Okay.
We talked about those mental shortcuts, the heuristics that we all use, and how things like framing, the context you're in, even just what you happen to remember or forget, how all that can heavily influence our choices, often operating below our conscious awareness. It raises a really important question, I think. Considering all these forces, the cultural, the social, the personal, the psychological quirks, the marketing efforts, how much of what you buy is really the result of a truly analytical, rational, step-by-step process?
Versus.
And how much is being subtly nudged, shaped, or maybe even steered by forces you might not even realize are at work? Something to ponder on your next trip to the store or your next click online.